Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Forge. Today, I'm going to go through the fun and exciting position of the tight ends. Going to create my first version of the rankings. These are based on my projections, which are based on, and these rankings are both based on how they performed last year. Of course, they could have changed teams. The offensive coordinator for their current team or the new team could have changed. So there are other factors that I am taking into account, but not every factor is being taken into account at this point in the offseason in terms of potentially if they're a little bit banged up right now and they haven't been participating in stuff. I'm not too concerned about that at this point in time. Same with like some of their teammates. If a star player on some of these teams ends up going down or whatever by the time that we're drafting, we're not so sure about them, that might raise the value of these guys a little bit. That's always possible. But at this point in the offseason, I'm just not too worried about those things. I'll use Christian McCaffrey as an example. At this point last offseason, we just monitored that situation. As I came up to about, as the preseason began, and things were still unsure about that, and the news really wasn't too complete, I was very against taking him at all in the first round anymore by the time, you're getting into your drafts. There was just too much risk with it at that point in time. I was like, I'll let somebody else deal with that, and that had made it clear that I was going then wide receiver first last year. So there are things that we're just going to monitor, but for now, in terms of the rankings, I'm not going to let them impact the rankings at this point in time. We're just looking at if everything goes into the season as expected, which sometimes maybe my expectations are different than somebody else's, then this is where I would rank this player. And of course, these rankings will change throughout the offseason to some extent, but I have not done this exercise yet. I don't know what order these all will end up in. I do, obviously, while I put them into tiers based on what spit out from my projections, I did see some patterns of what I think will happen, and that's why we have these tiers. So we have a stud tier, a near stud tier, more confident enough, and less confident group for that big group of tight ends that are all start worthy at times throughout the season, but really don't give you much of any kind of edge at the position compared to others, because that's just how it works out for tight ends. And then we've got our backup / upside potential group, the low upside starters. So there is like this upside potential with these guys, whether they hit it or not. Will probably just be too inconsistent is ultimately what those types of players typically end up being. And then you have the guys who probably need an injury ahead of them or just would be a surprise if they were to break out, but there's the potential of that happening, one or the other kind of, for that group, which that group looks probably pretty solid. Let's start at the top here, though, with our studs, Trey McBride, George Kittle, Brock Bowers. No complaints there. I will say Brock Bowers is kind of on the edge here because Las Vegas did improve in their wide receiver room. That has gotten better. And they also have a better running back who could also take some receiving work. So some of the top-end edge of Brock Bowers probably lines up for a situation where he does not improve over last season, which really would have put him just outside, but barely, of being like these two had difference-making seasons compared to Brock Bowers by a little bit fantasy-wise. And that's half PPR. Full PPR, I think, would have been a different story. So, nonetheless, probably the counterweight to that will be that this team's better. Brock Bowers will be in line for more touchdowns, which are very important, especially for the tight end position. Probably the most important for tight ends compared to any position, in terms of their having weeks that are ultimately can help win the week for you in fantasy football. So, ultimately, it's tough to keep him out of this stud group, but he is more borderline, I think, than these two. I could be convinced. Full PPR, I would probably say Brock Bowers over George Kittle there. But I think George Kittle's probably in line with Brandon Ayuk being injured and everything for another big year. We'll see. I do have him actually getting a little less target share than he got last season. Near studs, Jonnu Smith, I think we can probably just move him down a tier. for sure for now. Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, going to be just outside of this group. Not quite game changers, but, when you talk about like this confidence scale, very confident. And, if they were to have a studly year, Travis Kelce probably due to just having a really high touchdown season, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world for these guys. But also, if they fall behind a few of these players, it wouldn't be a shock either. In that next group, we have Jonnu Smith near the top. Now, like I said, we're not going to factor in the contract things going on, trade rumors and whatnot. If that stuff happens, then we will adjust once it happens. But for now, we're going to assume that something happens, that Jonnu Smith is starting by week 1 and probably for Miami. So, with that said, he ended up in a great role last year, something that they really needed. I don't know that they've done anything this offseason to remove that role from being something that he could reprise, and it wasn't something that they went into the season with, so it could be something that they might even increase a little bit this offseason. And Jonnu Smith has been a very good tight end, especially receiving tight end his entire career. So could he have a year or two where he just happens to be a top 5, top 6 type of fantasy tight end? I think that's possible. So I'm not too opposed. I'm not opposed to him being in this tier, that's for sure. Behind that, Pat Freiermuth, I do think is in line to potentially have a pretty strong season. There are limitations to his upside for multiple reasons. So, he'll be behind some names here. We're going to move Evan Ingram. Does he get moved up? He's going to be playing in Denver. Obviously, Sean Payton has made some pretty good tight ends in the past out of some guys. And that receiving room didn't really change. So there's definitely room for him to come in and be, would the second best receiver on that team be shocking? I don't think so. So that's pretty promising. That's, similar with Pat Freiermuth. Could he get targeted a little bit more just because of lack of other talent? That's probably very possible. It is hard for me to take any of these guys over Mark Andrews. He's been really injured the last year and a half, and that seems to have impacted his upside play. And they did improve the wide receiver room a little bit. I am going to keep him just outside of that near studs group. And I don't know how comfortable I am drafting him anymore. And he's been my darling. Colston Loveland, Chicago. They have a good group of receivers. So I don't think he comes in and becomes like immediately the second best receiving option in this room in terms of all just receivers. For Chicago, I do think we have to assume there's higher upside than Pat Freiermuth, though, so let's do that. TJ Hawkinson, obviously a very good tight end. Going to have J.J. McCarthy playing. A lot of opportunity there as well. And I think it would be silly to keep him behind Colston Loveland. I just think there's more opportunity there, and the quarterback should target him. J.J. McCarthy, young quarterbacks do tend to rely on their tight ends plenty enough. TJ Hawkinson, Evan Ingram, Denver, Minnesota. Ultimately, I think there's more upside for Evan Ingram. I am feeling like maybe we should move Jonnu Smith back, though, behind that group, at least. And then maybe there's more potential for Colston Loveland. I don't know. That's close. Maybe when contract stuff gets resolved, I'll move Jonnu Smith back up. But I think we'll do that for now. Then Tucker Kraft in Green Bay. They spread the ball around. It's such an up and down thing. He had a good season. A lot of that was due to touchdown stuff. I was warning you about that throughout the season. I think we start to move into this confident enough tier right about here. Dalton Kincaid, will he take that step forward? I think I want to say, compared to Pat Freiermuth, in Buffalo, there's just a lot of competition for targets. I'm gonna keep him in the confident enough tier, and then David Njoku feels like. Do you remember the last time that he had what's his name, Joe Flacco, throwing to him? It was good. Now he's somebody who throughout the season though things might get worse, right? And they're going to run a lot more. So I don't think we see that high upside. But he was really, really a part of that. Joe Flacco had a lot of Joe Flacco's trust. So I think maybe is this a cutoff? Do we cut off before Colson Loveland? Does Colson Loveland fall down a tier here? And Johnny Smith and Pat Frymuth into confident enough? That kind of feels more like the right language. So one thing I will say about Dalton Kincaid, and why he could climb higher, is, as I recall, he's just like a touchdown away from having good weeks. I do think the target share was quite good. It was definitely there. So I'm definitely confident enough in him. Maybe even more so than some of these other options. All right, so I felt a little bit burnt by Dalton Kincaid last year, but as I thought about my experience with him, it was one of those things where he was always just like, just give me the touchdown. I definitely did not have a whole lot of touchdowns. I didn't look into that, but in terms of his target share, it was more than TJ Hockenson was last year. Of course, we have a different quarterback situation going on there and everything, but just to, say, he's definitely in this Evan Ingram area, Hockenson. And then we take a little bit of a step down when we get to that next group. And then we go into these less confident players. So Zach Ertz, a minute older, still a bit of an injury risk. He did not quite make it through last season. But he was a top 10 option throughout almost all of the year until you finally started to try to trust him at the end of the year. And then he wasn't, and then he trailed off throughout like the final 3 weeks and the playoffs. So that was unfortunate. Now Mason Taylor, I don't know if I'm going to be on an island on this. I have no clue where the fantasy community is on their rankings this year right now. But for Mason Taylor, I think there is one heck of an opportunity for the New York Jets. There is, I might even go up here. There is not a lot of receiving talent there, right? He could be second, third highest targeted receiver in this offense very easily. And we have seen Justin Fields feed a tight end and get, near top 12-ish type of production out of Cole Kmet in the past. Now, he is a rookie, so it's like, lack of confidence there a little bit. But I do think the potential for Mason Taylor is very high as taking as your second tight end. If you take Dalton Kincaid, pair that up with Mason Taylor or something like that. If you take David Njoku, whatever the case, pair that up with Mason Taylor. At the end of your draft, hopefully, I assume, maybe, and boom, I think you're looking pretty good. So K-Dot, though, probably still over Mason Taylor, right? They have a lot of receiving options, though, everywhere. I think I'm going to lean into that opportunity for Mason Taylor over K-Dot. I think Hunter Henry's coming off of a very solid season, definitely touchdown reliant, but I do anticipate that offense to get a little bit better, and I don't know how much better that receiving room got. So, very much in the same vein. I almost wonder, do I want to go like this? That might make more sense here. Kyle Pitts, less confident, unfortunately. He still gets a good target share, but it's not like a high passing offense. But another guy who, like, if the touchdowns just came, it would be a different story. So between him and Zach Ertz, like, there's this floor and ceiling argument, and it's so close, but Zach Ertz was still better than him last year. I think Dallas Goedert's had a couple of weird seasons. I'm actually probably confident enough in Dallas Goedert. If he could just stay healthy, he could return. They haven't, I don't think, solved that third receiving option there. It's close to being less confident, but I think I still feel confident enough in him. And then you got Tyler Warren, Indianapolis, another situation. A lot of receivers. Obviously, coming in with a high pedigree. So, I mean, I'll take the chance on him over Kyle Pitts. They'll probably end up being something similar, and it'll just come down to touchdowns about which one's better, if I had to guess. There's still quite a bit of competition in the middle of the field there for Zach Ertz. They brought in Deebo Samuel. You still have Austin Eckler and then Zach Ertz, all attacking the similar area of the field. I think there's other slot receiver might have gone down at practice the other day, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And I don't know what came of that, but he was carted off. But I think usually at practices they're pretty. Some teams are like everybody's carted off, no matter what is the protocol. Tyler Warren or Hunter Henry? Indianapolis, New England. Tough to say which offense would be better. I feel like Indianapolis has better receivers than New England, which means that it's going to be tougher for Tyler Warren, and the quarterback situation's probably better for Hunter Henry. Yeah, that's the order I'm going to put in the less confident group. I think we'll keep them there. Backups, upside potential. So obviously Dalton Schultz has like some potential. I don't know. He's probably going to stay here. Jake Ferguson has upside once, I would say, once Dak Prescott returns more so than not. But he has less upside than last season, and it didn't quite work out last season. So I am, a definite lack of confidence in that. But I would still probably try that out over a Dalton Schultz. Mike Gesicki, he was very reliant on games when there were injuries to T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. I don't know. Did Jamar Chase get injured at all? I had him. I should remember that. I don't think so necessarily. He was kind of like the T. Higgins replacement. So I think he's highly dependent upon situation there. Brenton Strange, I would say, definitely has some upside. Very similar to Ferguson, but I'll give he's like a year behind Ferguson, at least in terms of his development rate. Yeah, I don't know. Terrence Ferguson, I like more than them. He is with the Rams, right? So there is a bit of a backlog of receiving talent there, or target potential there, which is why I'm not going to be higher on him, but I do like that potential a lot. And Chig just never has been a volume guy, and they brought in a tight end that I like as well, who doesn't quite make this list, I don't think. I'm trying to remember who it is. Hunter Helm, right? Gunnar Helm. And the thing is he's not he's like a reliable receiver. He'll probably never be a fantasy receiving option, but like a Dalton Schultz type, there is that potential there. And I do think that could steal away from a little bit of Chigozium's just being on the field even, opportunity potential. We'll leave that like this. And then I think we're correct in this group here. Isaiah Likely, well, I don't know about the order, but just in terms of these guys being here, we need an injury to happen, I think, for Ben Sinnott to get an opportunity. But if he gets that opportunity, I'll be all over it. If I'm struggling with my tight ends, I'll be all over it in terms of my waiver wire suggestions for people. So that is something to keep in mind. Harold Fannin, I really like a lot. I think he has also probably needs an injury to occur, and also going to be on, I think, a lesser passing offense in general, but definitely just as talented of a receiving option than Ben Sinnott, if not more, probably even more. Elijah Arroyo, I think, probably works behind Noah Fant, but also has more receiving potential. Noah Fant's just kind of like in this low side starter. Honestly, he could just be in this tier. And there are reasons where I would draft these guys instead of this tier, right? This tier is like if you missed out on tight ends and you just need a starting tight end, because this tier is going to be guys who on any given week, these guys will probably be better for now. At least that's the thought, obviously. And Jatavian Sanders might even make it into that tier too. Unlikely upside. You know what? We'll put him at the top of this tier. Isaiah Likely is another guy who needs an injury to happen, but we know that he's very, very high. I would say I would rank him over Elijah Arroyo. Theo Johnson, definitely unlikely upside grouping here, but there is that potential. So I'm going to put Ja'Tavion Sanders, Theo Johnson up ahead of Isaiah Likely because they don't need an injury. They should be the starters. The best receiving tight ends on their teams is most likely the case. So maybe, I don't know, whatever. And then we have like the guys who need an injury most likely to happen. Elijah Arroyo, I do think, I'm going to say, because of the unknown, does have a chance of coming in and just being the team's third wide receiver. Now, there are other candidates for that I think probably beat him out for it, but that's why it's unlikely upside, right? So there we go. Those are my tight end rankings for this season, starting off with Trey McBride, followed by George Kittle, Brock Bowers. Mix them up however. I don't care if you think Brock Bowers is number one. I will not argue with you with that, but feel free to argue why you think that in the comments. I can be convinced of moving him all the way up. Maybe, but probably not, honestly. Not over Trey McBride, I don't think. Not yet. Near studs, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce. That wraps up my top 5 tight ends. And, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta. We could almost just get rid of that tier and make this a tier, to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't be opposed to that by too much. But we'll keep it like this. More confident. My tight end 6, Mark Andrews, followed by Evan Ingram, TJ Hawkinson, Dalton Kincaid, David Njoku. And now we're moving into, I think, just clear tight end 2 type of territory, where some of these guys might technically be tight end 1s in terms of being a top 12 tight end. But in terms of production, they're for sure not going to be different makers. I doubt. Difference makers, I doubt. Colson Loveland, followed by Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Tucker Kraft, Mason Taylor, Cade Otton, Dallas Goedert. Nonetheless, there is some, top 7 type of tight end potential in here. So that's good enough when you can get it most likely where you're going to be able to draft most of these guys in the draft. It'll be for a value. Then where I don't know that you're getting value, and maybe you're overpaying depending on where they're going, would be the Hunter Henry, Tyler Warren, Zach Ertz, Kyle Pitts. So Tyler Warren's the one who's probably going the highest out of this group. I assume he's going higher than Goddard, Cade Otton, Mason Taylor for sure. I don't know, but I assume for sure. Maybe he's going in this group. Tucker Kraft, Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith probably not getting quite the love that I'm going to give him. Colson Loveland, probably like in that group of 4. Would be my guess based on past production. And then David Njoku, I don't know where that'll happen, where people are going to put him coming into the off season. And then Terrence Ferguson, Brenton Strange, Jake Ferguson. If I would take the chance on these guys, honestly, over Kyle Pitts, it's going to be one of those cases where I feel like I have to put Kyle Pitts ahead of him, but I might just take the risk if it's my tight end 2. If it's my tight end 1, I'll take Kyle Pitts. If it's the second tight end coming off of the board, I'll take one of these guys instead and just bank on the potential upside. Although I could just move Kyle Pitts into this group and then I could say the same thing almost, So that's going to be how I have them ranked. Probably Kyle Pitts over these guys. And then you got Chig Okonkwo, Dalton Schultz, Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, Ja'Tavion Sanders, Theo Johnson. Probably just going to be really inconsistent, but also probably going to have a few weeks where these guys go off at some point throughout the season. Same with Elijah Arroyo, probably goes off. Isaiah Likely kind of needs an injury ahead of him for that to be the case, but we know it's possible. They did improve their wide receiver room too, so I really don't foresee them doing like 2 tight end stuff with Isaiah Likely getting onto the field too often, enough for him to be fantasy relevant. And Ben Sinnott, Harold Fannin Jr. are guys who I'm really excited about if they get the opportunity, but until that opportunity comes, and I think there needs to be an injury for that opportunity to come to be fantasy relevant, I'm not going to really bet on them. I'll leave them on the waiver wire even. But the moment that it happens, if I got room for him on my roster, I'm going to be taking him. So those are my tight end rankings for the 2025 season. I feel pretty good about most of this. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care.